almost 40 years ago since we made The Saint. And what I'm doing now, I couldn't be doing then, because actually I would be walking on water. Here we're on reclaimed land in the port of Cap d'Ai. Behind us actually is Monaco, and this is the miracle of construction. My name's Roger Moore. I played Simon Templar. My career started in television in 1948. Live television, Alexandra Palace, 2 stages, BBC. And then I went to America and I worked in television there, live television. They were all live in those days. They occasionally made a kinescope of what you were shooting or what you were acting in. And then I went to Hollywood and I made 4 features, and I came back and I did the Ivanhoe series.
Ivanhoe, Ivanhoe, far and wide throughout the countryside they know.
I figured at that time that there was such a stigma attached to appearing in a television series, and especially, a kidult series, as they called those, that I would never get another feature film, so I better find something else to do, and I tried to. My father always said there were two books that he'd read, a series of books. One was The Toff and The Saint. I didn't like the sound of The Toff, but I tried for The Saint, and Charteris was not interested in it going to television at that time. I think Simon Templar first came into my life long before acting did, because I would see George Sanders.
This is about the first time I've seen dawn breaking without a hangover.
I can't help wishing that man I knocked out has one.
Lovely. I ended up working with George Sanders in Hollywood. We made a film called The King's Thief. He was an amazing man, George Sanders. He actually committed suicide when he was 65. And he had told David Niven 15 years before. He said, when I'm 65, David, I shall kill myself. Very sad. Simon Templar, according to The Flyleaf, the closest way I can think of describing Simon, or Sebastian Tombs, which he used as his cover quite often, never getting far away from ST, could use the same language. Simon Templar was, as Charteris described him, a modern-day Robin Hood, robbing the rich, but not the rich, robbing the evildoers, the sinners, taking back what they'd stolen. Bob, I think, went to Florida to see Leslie Charteris, but I think it was John Petty-Carstairs who did make that initial introduction. Bob and Monty must have started negotiating and then approached Lou Grade with a sort of fait accompli. Who knows why Leslie changed his mind, particularly when it was going to be the same actor involved, but maybe he didn't remember from 4 or 5 years previous. And I was with an agent called Dennis Van Taal at that time. And I was in Italy. I just made 2 films, or I made one, and I was about to make another one in Italy, and he said, there was this offer for the same. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I haven't sort of thought about The Saint since I tried to acquire it. I read a script, and I said, Dennis, this is an awfully long script for a 30-minute show. So he then called somebody in the office in London who said, no, it's a half-hour series. So on the basis of a half-hour series, I went ahead. I thought 26 or 39 episodes, it's half a year, and doodly-doo. Got the press conference with Monty and Bob and Lou Grade at Marble Arch, where the offices were of ATV, and Lou started saying, we're going to make 39 hours. I said, half hours? And Bob and Monty took me outside. They said, no, it's hours. I said, oh dear, I have a contract that sort of is based on a half-hour series. Then I realized it was going to be twice the workload, and it should be twice the price. Lou was very persuasive. We did alter it in Lou's favor. Of course, Lou Gray was the most extraordinary man. He was one of the great entrepreneurs. He was the most persuasive man. He had great ideas. If he wanted to listen to you, he did, but he invariably would shove a great big Cuban cigar in your mouth and you had to shut up. He could charm the skin off a rice pudding.
I don't know what your tastes are in theater. Maybe you like the sweat and the grunt school of acting. Me, I come to the theater for fun, for laughs, for excitement.
I don't think that when I started doing the Saint that I was conscious of anybody else having done it. It's a new part. As I often said was I nervous about doing Bond? No, not until, I was not nervous about Bond until 5 minutes before the press screening.
Roger Moore is James Bond, 007, in Ian Fleming's Live and Let Die.
And then after 3 minutes, I said to myself, well, a lady who's going into the delivery room is going to have a baby, good, bad, or indifferent. The baby's going to come out.
Absolutely.
We had a meeting with Charteris. He would make observations on all the script. He would be consulted on his original stories and then stories that we had to invent when they started running out of books. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because of the television restrictions, because we were making a series that was going to be shown around the world and you have to worry about the various censor problems in different countries. So I always felt he was a bit of a Boy Scout. For example, when you throw a punch, as a hero, you have to throw it to the jaw. You don't put it below the belt. You can't cheat. I said, and I remember saying that if we're going to say we have to be careful about this because children can be influenced or will imitate you, then they're going to lose an awful lot of fights, because if somebody comes at you with a knife or with a broken bottle, you kick them where it hurts. Patrick McGowan was considered, but he didn't like kissing girls on screen. He was very Catholic. I didn't have any problem with the possibility of kissing leading ladies, because I had been doing that for quite a long time.
Clever, isn't it?
Darling Miss Klein, it is brilliant.
With or without glasses.
Who cares?
Isn't there room for me in this story?
For a television series, we thought that it might be a good idea to have a car that would be useful for promotion. So I said, whatever car we get, we were talking about a Jaguar, I think it was the XK150 or whatever it was at the time. And I said, let's get two cars, you buy one for the company and I'll buy my own personal. And if we should have second unit out, and one unit on the stage and need two cars, you always use mine. So Johnny called Jaguar in Coventry. They said, oh, there's a 3-month waiting list. He said, but this is for a television series that's going to be shown around the world. Well, what do we need publicity for? We have $25 million worth of orders we can't possibly fill. So Johnny said, I've got this motor magazine, and there was a picture of a Volvo P1800. Within 2 days, we had them taxed and on the road, the two of them. And they were very good Volvo, because every year they would change, having bought the originals, they would change them. And wherever I went in the world, they would sort of have a car at my disposal. And eventually, when I started with UNICEF and was in Stockholm, I spoke with Volvo, and their involvement became much higher in supplying funds and cars for UNICEF. The first day of shooting, on location, talented husband, Derek Farr, I was parked on the corner waiting for a signal that I should drive off in my Volvo ST1. As I sat there waiting, a police sergeant on a bicycle came up with clips on. Morning. Very interesting looking number plate, that? I said, yes. I said, it's fake, actually, because ST1 belongs to the Chief Constable of Stirlingshire, as a matter of fact. Oh, he's coming now. The policeman. He got rid of the bicycle. And he started producing his notebook, and I saw the hand signal, and and I took off like a shot of lightning. And then went around and came back, and he was still standing there. I've always enjoyed working. Being Ingrid, I haven't been very lucky. And to do something that I really had wanted to do and had tried to do before, it was absolutely marvellous. And you also, when you're the star of or the leading player in a television series, everything is, you're the one character, everything is built around you. You don't have to, there are no co-stars. It is your show. It's rather like being the only guest on a Muppet show. You don't have any competition, apart from very talented Muppets.
Roger, mon amour, you know we are meant to be, vous et moi.
Vous et moi, nous.
Huh? Oh, Roger. Oh.
We filmed The Saint, my series of The Saint, at Elstree, Bournemouth Studios, ABPC Studios, where I suppose many famous people had been. Rather let the side down having me there, didn't it? When they started doing renovations in the studio, Brian Forbes came in and was running ABPC, and they expanded. And we had new stages and new parking lots underground, which became very well used in every television series. You know, immediately you want a garage. We were down there. But they also built a restaurant, a nice restaurant. I can remember Betty Davis being there. I was most impressed. She knew who I was. You could go from one stage to another and see what else was shooting. We had the Avengers shooting on stages next to us, and Michael Rennie was doing a series, The Third Man, that I'd actually done one of The Third Man in Hollywood at Fox. There was another show shooting, and there was a Swedish actress in it, and she came onto our set. And I think she'd done things with Ingmar Bergman, films, that is. And she said, do you mind if I'll come on your set? And I said, no, you've got a passport? She said, yes, and she held up the Bible. Oh. She said, do you read this? I said, well, quite honestly, I have so much time. Little time to read. I have to read scripts and learn those. Oh, you should read it. She was very deep, and a hairdresser from her set was saying, and so they did. They took her off, and apparently a little later that day she was supposed to be playing a resistance fighter, and she had to jump out of a tree and stab an actor dressed up as a German stormtrooper. And she went for him with a knife, and he felt the tip go into him, and he started running. They caught him in St. Albans. She was still trying to kill him. She was really into it.
The Côte d'Azur. Golden sunshine, golden money, and golden girls.
I really got to hate that back lot. They were nice stages, but the back lot, and rather a limited vista. There was sort of a line of poplars as windbreakers, which I think pop up in the back of every shot, be it in the Bahamas or the desert in Saudi Arabia. Those trees were always there. We had some standing sets on there that got revamped. There's a sort of a trick they get away with, try to get away with in television, where they have a bridge across the road, where there's never likely to be a bridge, but that just stops you seeing the top of the set and the inevitable poplar trees. I used to stand out there in a silk suit, freezing to death, with a rubber palm tree blowing in front of my face, and they would write on the screen, Nassau, Bahamas. And I would say, wouldn't it be wonderful to go to these places? Well, of course, you go and shoot in those places, which I eventually did with Persuaders and then with Bond. And of course, you say, oh, I wish I were on the back lot. And I could go home at the end of a day's shooting, and I wouldn't have to be standing here sweating, changing my shirt 45 times. The times I changed my shirt at ABP Elstree was because it got wet with rain instead of perspiration. I remember one day shooting on the back lot, and I had on a light grey silk suit we had a set that was street and interior, so you could move from the street into the interior, but we didn't have enough lights to light the interior, so we relied rather like the early days of Hollywood, where it was sunlight. So we moved to the inside, but there's no roof, and the sun was no longer there, but there was rain, and it raining inside, and I stopped shooting, and I said, you know what? I said, well, you know, it's raining. It won't show unless it's backlit. I said, my suit's changing colour. Oh, well, you have to make do and mend. There was one wonderful moment. It wasn't in our series, but it was in another series that was being shot at Austrian Express, and it said Paris on the screen, and there was Borehamwood High Street, just outside the studio. The car, and Lou looking at this, and he said, the cars are on the wrong side of the street. So this is supposed to be Paris. So they flipped the film. Oh dear. You can't shoot in a car on a set. You need sort of the engine taken out so you can put the camera in front. Today, with lens and lighting, you can do things in cars and you can put them on low loaders. When we were making the Saint, that was absolutely unheard of. We would, if we had a 2-second clip driving a car in profile, it would be against a drum. We had 2 drums. We had one drum that had bits of shiny silver paper on it and houses, and that would spin, and the light on it, it would become light, and we'd put twigs in front of it, and we'd be driving through the country. When Bob Baker and Monty Berman were producing, and Monty kept a very tight rein on costs. And so there was from Rush's one day, the stuff we'd shot the day before the dailies. I'm sitting in the Volvo driving, and then apparently without a cut, it is the camera operator sitting in the driving seat. And I'm running alongside. I hold up a piece of paper which says, stop. He holds up a piece of paper and says, why? And I say, because my thing is caught in the door. Well, everybody loved it, except Monty, who then said that the director had to pay for the footage that had been wasted. I think knowing the sense of what a scene is about, the character is about, you more or less know exactly what it's going to say. Yes, sometimes there are particular words that you have to point up, so you have to do that 2 or 3 times to remember it. But most of the time I didn't have any problems with memory. Now I can't remember what memory is, but in those days it seemed to be quite easy. Although there was one occasion where I had a line that is indelible in my mind now. Michael Truman was directing, and the script got Josie Fulford on the rehearsal. She said, I'll bet you $5 bob you won't say it on the take. I said, you make it 10 bob if you like. And the line was, I'm talking about somebody in Paris. And I say, yes, I remember him during the war. He was responsible for perforating the intestinal tracts of Himmler's hatchet men with even more ulcers than bullets. 15 takes later, and there's this idiot actor can't say a line. So he said, could you cut it down a bit?
I worked with him during the resistance. He was a very brave man. He gave Himmler's hatchet men even more ulcers than bullets.
Oh, print that.
What do you have to do to get some service around here?
People in restaurants always look terribly shocked when somebody shouts or yells. I kind of enjoy it. It adds a zest to living. However, I am not enjoying the spectacle of Belinda Dean behaving like a spoiled brat.
I think the fun that there was in The Saint was that having settled into it and having this idea of addressing the camera. So you're taking the audience in with you. You're with them. So we could go off in different directions. We could have fun with it, or we could be very serious. But invariably, I played it tongue-in-cheek. It is funny the reaction you get to certain things in shows. There was an episode where I'm traipsing across Spain or somewhere with a girl who's very difficult. The actress playing her wasn't difficult, but the character she's portraying is difficult. And Simon Templar in the end sort of gets exasperated and he pulls across his knee and he smacks the bottom.
You're just about the worst. Let me go! No! Let me... Oh!
And there's so many people with fetishes in the world, you cannot believe the mail that came in. We leapt up 3 points in the ratings. Call me Spanky.
And as for working my passage, I don't have to work my passage anywhere.
It's very difficult to work with the same group of people, you know, not the actors, but the same group of technicians that you don't have jokes with, and you're making a joke before a shot. They hated me on the set because if there was a soda siphon, which you don't see around these days, but soda siphons, and they knew what was going to happen, that I would always get myself near a soda siphon at the end, and then they couldn't. I say, no, you can't do it to me. You know, I'm on camera. It was an episode where Simon Templar has a frogman's outfit and he's swimming across supposedly a lake in Switzerland to get some professor out. The girl has come, or Simon, please, you must help my father. He's a professor and he's locked up by this mad count in Switzerland. The end of November, I think there was a little touch of snow on the ground. It was freezing cold, and Les Crawford, who was my stunt double, was going to do the long shots for me in the water that I'm directing. And he's got about 10 yards following the boat. And he said, I can't go on, Gav. And he started cramping up. So he said, but he says, the secret is, you know, pour the coffee down the wetsuit. And so I was pouring coffee and pouring brandy down my throat. And I was jumping in and out of the water, and I was doing all these shots and swimming and leaping around behind the camera. And then at 1 o'clock we finished, and I got in the car to drive back to the studio. And wham, was the door shut. The brandy that I hadn't felt before suddenly, but I said, Les, you have to drive. Les was very funny. One of the other tricks in television is you don't have time to build a lot of sets, and so you invariably find a warehouse. So you've got a lot of cardboard boxes. You can move them around at any angle. You don't have to move the camera. Just change the boxes from side to side and shoot in that direction. And Les came and he said, I got a wonderful idea. We got all these packing cases. He said, you're going to run along the boxes. The villains are after you. And you run along the boxes, and there's a ladder, and you jump onto the top of the ladder, and you swing from one row to the other. So I said, fine, Les, let's see how it works. So he runs up, and he gets onto the ladder, and he jumps. The boxes the other side were much lower, so when the ladder hit, it sprang, and it came straight back, a rung came straight back into his face. And there was claret everywhere, and his eyebrows popped, and he fell down. I said, oh, God, you're a mess, Les. I said, you know, you get down to see the sister and the nurse. So he went off, and we got home, finished off shooting, whatever we were doing. Les came back. He's now got plaster across his nose and this bandage all around him. And I said, Les, you can't work anymore. Go home. He lived just around the corner from the studio. And as soon as he walked out of the gate, I called his wife. I said, Aunt, Les is on his way home. Now, what I've done to him is nothing the next time I find him with my wife. So poor Les walked in the door, and his wife is ready to kill him, especially when she saw him. I don't think he ever forgave me for that. Had an Irish actor who was in a fight, and I have to punch him out of the scene, and the stunt boys said, don't go down on the floor, just fall backwards into our arms. You just go straight back, and we'll be there, we'll catch you. So I hit him, and instead of going straight backwards, he went straight down on the floor. And there was, oh, Jesus, oh. And he got up in his arm, said we'd go and see the nurse. And he came back, and Monday morning, that was Friday, and Monday morning he turned up at the studio. He's got his arm in plaster, and it's continuity. But fortunately, he was in this show, he was the doorman of a pirate bar club. And so I said, oh yes, well, we've never seen that much of him. Would stick a hook in the end of his sleeve, and he is, hook the doorman. And he had to be in another fight, so I got rid of him right at the very beginning. And I was very stupidly taking something, because they'd been prescribed, to lose weight. I didn't know they were uppers. It was something called Durafet, Dospan. And I had all this incredible energy, and I had to throw bar stools and captain's chairs all over the place. And he was already on the floor, and I heaved one of these chairs. It went sailing through the air and hit him in the head. Oh, I'm sorry about that. And every time I threw it, it would hit him, and finally got him in the kidneys. You can't use any of this. But he said, oh, my back. Ah, Jesus Christ. Oh, God, off. And he said, I'm going home. I didn't realize until I guested on somebody else's show what a pain I must have been to work with, because I knew everybody, and we all had our little jokes and shorthand way of talking to one another. And coming in, I tried to put people at their ease and would make jokes, but sometimes my making jokes put them off. They thought that was a devilish trick on my part, so that I would look better, which is not true at all. Julie Christie was very interesting. You couldn't, sort of the first day of shooting with her, I think Bob and Monty were very worried about it. But then what happened on the screen was the difference between having a screen personality and not.
Can you keep a secret?
Try me.
In the words of the trade, I was casing the joint.
Why?
I want to commit a crime as soon as possible.
Be careful.
You'll help me, won't you?
Why should I?
Because you're Simon Templar.
I make a point of never helping beautiful ladies commit crimes until we're formally introduced.
My name is Judith Northwade. Bert Northwade is my uncle. It's his house I want to rob.
She was a star. You could see it on the screen.
Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
She never gave me a job.
Hi, what are you up to?
What's that?
What it looks like, a tape recorder.
Yeah, dear Lois. And of course, I 6, 7 bonds with Miss Moneypenny.
And that's the door I went through.
Oh, Simon, look, Roberto,
Now,
pay
you
up.
wait in the car.
I thought that...
Saints rush in where publicity women aren't allowed. Now, get in the car.
But what if something happens to you?
Nothing's going to happen to me.
It was always nice to see Lois. And having been in the same class at RADA with her, I think we shared playing Henry V together. She played, the girls had to play the boys' parts, and boys never had to play the girls' parts at RADA, because there were 4 boys to 16 girls in every class. It was a good balance.
So you're the saint. Well, I'm John Wood, baby. And in here you watch your manners when you talk to me, and don't you forget it.
Donald Sutherland was a very interesting actor. And I was doing one of those familiar storylines where when the hero gets himself sent to jail so he can get in with a criminal and find out, where the money is, what the plot is. And Donald was very good and very interesting. 10 days after we finished shooting, he called me and he said, I'm up for a film. Could I show this episode? And I said, yeah, as far as I can. He was concerned, you can, but it's still being cut. So if they come out to the studio and see what there is. He said, well, they can't. They want it in Hollywood. Anyway, we got something together, and he got the Dirty Dozen.
Mr. Simon Templar.
Marco de Cesare, come stai? Bene?
I am magnificent. And how are you?
Oh, Marco, it took you long enough to find me.
Well, as soon as I get the word that you are in Rome, boom, I drop everything.
Warren was a taxi driver every time I was in Rome. And I taught him all sorts of real Italian swear words, which he liked to use. But he was very upset because during that, one of the television writers in one of the papers said, there seemed to be just one little group of actors that turned up in everything, like Warren Mitchell. This was long before Till Death Do Us Part. And it affected, Warren was furious about it because they stopped casting him in various parts because he was too familiar as a recurring character actor in all the ITC shows.
You know, Mr. Templar, sometimes I wish I had never met you.
Forgive the intrusion.
What you doing in my room, Templar?
Well, as you probably heard until this morning, it was my room. In the switch, I forgot this.
I don't remember seeing a toothbrush.
Would have fallen down behind the washstand.
If I thought you were looking through my things, Templar.
Would you care to go through my pockets for stolen valuables? Sleep well.
Oliver Reed, I thought, was wonderful heavy in Sophia, which was supposed to be Greece, the back lot at ABPC, Boreham Wood. And he was very, very good indeed. But I can remember one episode that he was shooting where he was one of the gunmen, the hitmen. And at the last scene of the episode is the usual where Simon Templar gives the reason why, the butler thought it was the maid from the third floor, but in actual fact it was the under footman. And, usual, me being boring. And Oliver is about to take a shot at somebody and the camera is over him, and I shoot him or somebody else shoots him, but he gets shot. And Oliver, knowing that they're not going to come around on him with the camera, is determined his face will be in shot. So the camera's over his shoulder, and so as he's hit, he jumps up in the air, turns around and tries to keep his face poised as long as possible in front of the lens before he hits the floor. And we did we had about 5 takes, and we've got to go into another page and a half of dialogue with me as the camera folds in. And on the last take, he goes, pom, bang. And I start talking, well, you all thought it was the undermaid, but I tell you it was the butler who was, and I hear, and I thought, I'm not going to be disturbed by this, I will go on with my speech. I'm going to kill Oliver Reed when this is, and my eyes at that, I couldn't stay any longer, and I looked down and I saw him, he was grey-green, and his tongue was hanging out the side of his mouth, and I stopped, and John Gelling said, why have you stopped? I said, because Oliver Reed is concussed or he's dead or he's dying or something. He says, oh, God. He said, get the nurse, put the camera over here. Great sympathy in film studios. But Oliver, he really was, he was concussed. I remember working with almost every director that I worked with, particularly the good ones. I had such a good time with dear Leslie Norman, who was Barry Norman's father, with Roy Baker, John Gilling, a very funny man called Jeremy Summers, who we did a lot at the beginning. Having spent so much time in the business and having been directed, I had the itch to direct myself, and I also figured that I would have one less person to argue with. Not that I argue very much, but I wanted to be able to tell the story from my point of view. When the bug first got me to direct, I said to Bob and Montague, I want to direct, and they nodded, yes. Crazy actor wants to direct. A little touch of megalomania about him here, Yes, of course you can direct. Just one slight problem. Don't have a union card. I said, what's your union card number? And I said, well, mine is even lower. And I'd been a member of ACT from during the war, when they were off serving their country, because they were a couple of years older than me. And I started off as a lonely in-betweener and animator at a company called Publicity Picture Production. So I had an ACT card, and I also learned about the value of a frame of film, how to cut, because you have to draw every frame. So I knew about cutting film. The technical side, camera right, camera left, which one gets very used to, having worked in the business all these years. So you know about the line and crossing the line. That comes instinctively. And if it doesn't, you know you've got an operator who says you can't do that gaff. My technique was to listen to everybody's idea, because people always volunteer ideas, and being able to adjudicate very quickly, being able to direct off the top of your head, change your mind very quickly. But what I would do is I would break down the script pictorially, and I would have an opening shot for a scene and the closing shot. And I would say to the actors and to the crew, I say, this is what I want to see on the screen at the beginning, and this is what I want to see at the end. Do what you think is comfortable in between those two things. Just let me see that, and work it out that way. Roy Ward Baker was a very good director. I learned the importance of the close-up change. I remember him saying, change the shape in television. You have to, unlike the cinema, where people are riveted, they just is the screen in front of them, the big screen. In television, you have a box in the middle of a room, and there's somebody going into the kitchen to get a glass of milk, and there's a kid shouting for some cornflakes. And so you're distracted all the time. And you can also drop off to sleep watching television. I find it a very good thing for sleeping with, because it's just going like that in front of you. So you have to change the image, change the shape, so people's eyes have to adjust, and also the sound. Sometimes you find it probably very irritating when you're watching television, a commercial channel, and the sound gets very loud on the commercial because they want to grab your attention. It's subtle, to say the least. A Hollywood director, Irving Rapper, that I made a film with in Hollywood, The Miracle, and was a very good friend, and I saw him in London as I was about to start directing, and he said, always have something in the foreground of a shot which gives you depth to judge things from, so frame an opening shot that way. So I would always do my drawings and always have that little bit of something of interest in the foreground. I would do a master shot and then move the camera over my shoulder so that all of a sudden I'm out of camera and I can just get on with being me and directing. And then I would save all the reverses on me until the end of the day, and I could really let people go home, because I could, have the script girl read the lines to me. Or I was so used to and so at home with the character, it was easy. Of course, I had some moments of absolute sheer terror. I always remember being a young, struggling actor, when are you not, old. And I would have to go to places like Shepperton Studios, and it would be my entire budget for the week would be spent on a train fare. And you'd get down there, and you'd be told you were too tall, too thin, too fat. You weren't the right type. I went down in uniform. I was acting captain, Guards Armour Division. I went to Shepperton because I was still on demob leave for a part in the picture about Guards Armour Division. They said I wasn't the right type. But anyway, but I remember those days, and so I would never ask actors to come out to the studio. On the off chance, if I could cast a film from looking at Spotlight and from people I knew in those days, the casting, so I would either sort of say, I had half a day off, I'll come up to London, I'm not shooting, and I will meet people there if I have to see anybody, or I'll do it on a Saturday morning. So I said to the casting director, who you've got for this part, Aunt Mabel or whatever it is. So we've got 3 actresses. So, Fabia Drake. I said, I can't interview Fabia Drake. She was my teacher at RADA. There's no way I can interview. He said, well, she's here. So she came in, and I said, good morning, Miss Drake. She said, no, I'm Fabia. You're Mr. Moore. I said, oh, please. I said, I presume you're here, you've read it, and you would you wanted to do it, otherwise you wouldn't have come. She says, that's right. I said, well, I'll see you on Monday morning. So now I then had the weekend to think about how I was going to ask her to do things. And she made it so easy for me. Where would you like me to be? How, is that the right, wonderful professional?
Simon Templar?
That's right.
Come aboard. Your cabin's off through there, but I'll show you around in a minute.
That set me at ease, I think, for the entire experience of directing. I'd done a recce over the weekend at Waterloo Station, and I worked out how I could shoot this with me not being in a scene for the morning shoot. So I could not look like Simon Templar while I was directing, and wouldn't get disturbed by the crowd and autographs and that. And so, well, first of all, I worked out shots over the clock. Everything was timed to the clock in Waterloo. And shots up here where I had a second camera waiting. I had people getting on, I know, Vauxhall down the line, getting on trains. Everything had to be timed. They were getting off a train. We didn't have the luxury of being able to have a train of our own. And then people in the foreground that I had to rehearse and do all this with. So I had an old beat-up trilby and an old scruffy jacket. And I tried to look as I hadn't had a shave, and I started running this. And my mother, unbeknownst to me, had come, and I told her I was shooting there. And she had come and was watching. She was standing at the back of this crowd of people, and she heard someone say, "Oh, he ain't half scruffy. Don't look like on the telly, do he?" And the reaction to what I'd put on the screen must have been favourable, because I went on to do more. I think what also worked in my favour was I got so much coverage on what I was shooting and worked very quickly. I would get more setups in than most people in a day. I've been offered a number of things, or used to get offered a lot of things to direct and also be in. And I never wanted to do that with a feature film. I want somebody else's eye. Lou's partner in America, with ITC, he didn't believe in the show as being a network show. And it was entirely due to a man called David Tebbutt, vice president of NBC, that said, you know that this show, in America, each city has a different station. And so you have a network, which is maybe 180 stations signed up to NBC or CBS or whatever, and that is network. And then you have the local channels, and on the local channel in New York, which happened to be an NBC station but wasn't network, their ratings were going through the roof for The Saint. So he said, this is a network show, Lou, get it on. And so we went into colour and went network. Which is working backwards, because in the old days you had a show that was on network and then you sold it into syndication, whereas we started off in syndication and then went network. I don't know whether the Americans put more money in. I think Lou just charged them more, so we had a little more in the budget for the colour. But in actual fact, colour was easier to work with than black and white, because with colour, as you probably know, you can shoot in fairly rotten light conditions, and it looks good in colour.
Well, hello, Dolly.
Hello, Dolly.
Hello, Charles. Aren't I divine?
You stole the scene, darling.
You must admit, it does move.
Oh, it moves all right. Predictably, but it moves.
Predictably to you. But then you're an expert. The famous Simon Templar.
We did the two-part Saints with the idea, there would be possibly a television feature, not a cinema feature. I was rather embarrassed, actually. The one we shot, The Saint Meets the Mafia, or whatever it's called, which we shot in Malta, which was supposed to be Sicily. We had said, the premiere of this film, to ingratiate ourselves with the Maltese authorities, would have the premiere in Malta, in Valletta. And it so happened that the Duke of Edinburgh was going to be there and became part of a number of celebrations, festivities for 2 or 3 days in Malta. And he had to sit through this 2-part episode. You know, something's not made for the big screen. And of course the audience were hysterical because they know Malta and they'd see, you know, nobody else in the rest of the world would know that cars traveling left to right on that road were actually going to hit one another because people recognise that those roads were going in that direction, whereas film you can get away with anything except in the country where you made it. So having the traffic go the wrong way up Regent Street. We had Finlay Curry playing head of the mafia, the Don Corleone. I think it was amongst about the last thing that poor Finlay did. The first assistant came and said to me, Finlay Curry's arrived in the studio. He said, I've got rid of the canvas chair, so I got him an armchair and a nice footstool because he doesn't look that well. So when he came onto the set, I went up and I said, Mr. Curry, I'm Roger Moore. I sort of tried to play Simon Templar. Hi. He said, I must apologise for the long hair. He had long white hair going a bit yellow. And I said, well, it's all right, sir. You look like a beetle. What? I said, you look like a beetle. What? Oh dear, I'm in this. I said, you look like a beetle. Aye, St. Peter, I played him. Oh dear, oh dear. I put up a few little errors there. It's in this big 4-poster bed. If we'd been a big budget, we'd have had actors around, but they were stuntmen all standing around. And Finlay said to me, he says, they really think I'm sick. They got this doctor standing by. Why does he sound like Sean Connery? Anyway, he said, there's this doctor standing by, and I couldn't say he's an actor playing a doctor. He's taking it again. Anyway, Finlay looks up at Simon Templar and he says, Simon Templar, what are you doing here in Palermo? Cut. I said, Jim, we're going to have to revoice him. He said, revoice Finlay Curry? You got the Oscar for playing St. Peter with a Scot.
Oh, not that it matters, but you have the wrong ideas of us.
Anyway, stuntmen looking at me, not making much pretense of biting their lip to stop seeing my reaction. Very ungracious of me.
There he is!
You're a miracle worker. We win the rally and it's raining champagne.
I have no idea what I expected at the end of the scene. I think I was just sort of happy that it was coming to an end because what I thought was going to be 39 half-hour or 26 half-hour episodes ended up being 100 and odd hours. I became very tired. People say, where's your halo? My daughter, who was born during the making of the scene, when she was about 4 or 5, she would come on the set with me and she would I'd hold it when I was doing a close-up, you know, the camera's there, and I would hold her hand down and she thought she was in films. And I remember once her explaining to a younger brother that they were very lucky that they had 2 daddies. There was a daddy Simon Templar and there was daddy here. And other times she would say to me, does that girl know that you're my daddy? They're sweet. I'm very grateful that people, if indeed they do, talk about it or watch it. I know on the odd occasion when I've been passing a television set and there's a sort of a rerun of something, and my God, I work with that actor or I work with that actress. And you forget completely.
You have my thanks, too.
Well, I was paid for the job.
But not for what you taught me about honesty and dignity.
I was very, very grateful for having done it, as I'm grateful for everything I've done. You learn from everything you do.
And also, Oliver Reed, you actually directed him in Sophia, didn't you? I think it was your first episode that you directed.
Is that going to disturb us, the yapping?
I can't hear it. Don't know what we can do about it.
Do you have a gun? This is son of Lassie trying to get back in the movies. Okay, or Rin Tin Tin. Or Wonton, the Wonder Dog. Thank you, Michael Winner. Calm down, dear, it's only a dog.